After my husband passed, I cared for my mother-in-law for 10 years. She said, "The inheritance goes to eldest son and his wife." Me? Okay. Please have them take over care. The wife decides to run away from home. "You're here just for the inheritance, aren't you? But I won't give you a single cent." Her cool expression carried a weight that froze my heart. For a moment I couldn't believe my ears. My mother-in-law, sitting across me, gave me a look filled with obvious disdain. That gaze stabbed sharply into my chest. At that moment, I was at a loss for words. The expression on her face was so indifferent that it made all my efforts feel futile. "Do you really believe that's what I'm thinking?" My voice finally came out, but it sounded hollow, even to me. "Of course, I won't let you have it. The $3 million will all go to my eldest son's family." Her words carried calculated cruelty and confidence. No matter how devotedly I had cared for her, there was no trace of gratitude in her heart. I felt something deep inside me crumble. Memories flashed vividly in my mind. 10 years of caring for her, sacrificing my life, making meals at night, giving her medicine, taking her to countless hospital visits. All of it now seemed like a meaningless effort. "I've taken care of you for 10 years. Is that how you've always seen me?" My voice trembled, but I forced myself to stay calm. Yet her expression didn't change. In fact, she smiled smugly, as if she enjoyed watching me struggle. I tried to respond calmly, but the mother-in-law's unchanging expression made it clearer. My sacrifices meant nothing to her. Well, it doesn't matter, does it? For a moment I remained silent. I felt drained of the strength to argue against her cold, unfeeling words, but something inside me shifted. That was the moment I decided my entire way of living had to change. My name is Mary Spears. After my husband passed away, life in the Spears household changed dramatically. Still, my days moved on steadily as I cared for my mother-in-law, Heather. I worked from home as an illustrator while caring for her every need. My son, Ken, had moved out after finding a job, leaving only the two of us in this large house. For someone like me, who lost my parents to an accident at a young age and was raised by relatives, this house was finally the family I'd longed for, at least until my husband, Brian, passed away. But living with Heather was far from peaceful. She had grown up as an only daughter in a wealthy family, always getting her way. To her, I was still the poor girl she looked down upon as her inferior daughter-in-law. "Mary, this dish is a bit bland, don't you think? What happened to those cooking skills from your restaurant job?" Her voice was laced with sarcasm as she spoke from her bed. "I'm sorry, Heather. I'll make it more flavorful next time," I replied quietly, but deep inside her words felt like tiny thorns piercing me. Every complaint she made was about small, insignificant things. Even hiring a helper a few times a week drew her ire. A daughter-in-law should care for her elders herself. Isn't that natural? There were moments when I wondered if I should have left this house when my husband died, but this place held precious memories of Brian and Ken. It was the house where Ken grew up and where I spent years building our life. So no matter how much Heather hurt me, I endured it somehow. My brother-in-law, Chris, and his wife Natalie lived nearby, but they never helped. Chris had been spoiled since childhood, never working seriously in his life. Heather doted on him, despite his lack of responsibility. I noticed Heather's savings and pension slowly disappearing after Brian's passing. "Mother, haven't there been a lot of withdrawals from your bank account recently?" Her response still lingers in my mind. Chris needed some money. He's the eldest son after all. I bit my tongue. I knew Chris was a spendthrift. Natalie too was someone who splurged on luxury brands while neglecting her household duties. Yet Heather never complained about Natalie. Natalie is such a sweet girl. A daughter-in-law should know how to navigate situations gracefully. Hearing those words made my chest tighten with frustration. No matter what I did, I realized Heather would never accept me. Chris and Natalie moved closer to the family home shortly after my father-in-law died. My father-in-law had always been strict and disapproved of Chris's behavior. I assumed Chris and Heather must have felt relieved when he passed away. He's the eldest son, so of course he should be close to this house. Yet, whenever I asked Chris to help with her care, he would always avoid it. "I'm busy with work, Mary. Natalie has a lot on her plate too." Work? I had never seen Chris work seriously in my entire life. As for Natalie, I had heard she didn't even manage the household properly, but Heather never schooled her. One day, Ken returned home. "Mom, I have some news. I'm getting married." Seeing his happy expression, my chest grew warm. The only reason I managed to endure this house for so long was because of Ken. "Really? Oh, that's wonderful, Ken." I hugged him tightly, feeling a tear of joy swell in my eyes. "Brian, Ken is going to be happy, isn't he?" I whispered silently to my late husband. But even as I celebrated Ken's happiness, I couldn't help but wonder, what would happen to my life in Heather's care now? Shortly after Ken's visit, Heather suffered a stroke. She woke up in the hospital, her voice faint, repeating over and over, "I want to go home." My husband and I had once discussed putting her in a care facility. How heartless can you be? Are you trying to shame us by sending mother to a facility? This house is everything to me. I want to stay here. Her voice carried the pride of a matriarch, and her attachment to the house she protected. Mary will manage this together. Back then, his strong and supportive words saved me. But now, Brian was gone. Caregiving was never easy from the beginning. Every day, I heard hurtful whispers from Chris and Natalie. Poor mother, I wonder if Mary is even caring for her properly? Make sure you sit her up straight, or her back will hurt. The two of them never once lifted a hand to help, but they always had something to say. Their cruel words hurt me deeply, but Brian's support kept me going. Don't let their worst get to you, Mary. You're doing enough. His encouragement was my rock. But then one day, Brian suddenly collapsed. He came home from work, complaining of a headache, lay down, and never woke up again. It was a stroke, sudden and cruel. During the funeral, Chris and Natalie didn't bother to show up until it was over. It was Ken who stayed by my side and helped me. Mom, Dad had a beautiful funeral. He would have been proud. Hearing Ken's words, I finally let the tears fall. Life after Brian's passing became even harder. I continued caring for Heather while dealing with Chris and Natalie's neglect. Mom's pension. Can you lend me some? I'll pay it back soon. It wasn't just once or twice that Chris came asking for money. Heather, instead of stopping him, would easily hand over the money. Chris is in trouble. We have no choice. I knew the inheritance Brian had arranged before his death. Heather must have inherited a considerable amount, but Chris has spent his share. Now they relied entirely on her savings and pension. Mary, you should dress a little nicer. Look at me, you need to sparkle a little. Natalie, wrapped in designer brands, laughed as she spoke. Behind her, Heather nodded approvingly, which made my frustration boil over. On top of that, Chris and Natalie spread rumors about me. Mary's only doing all this for the inheritance, you know. Hearing those words made me feel a strange mix of anger and disbelief. Despite paying for everything, the caregiver, medicine, and living expenses, they assumed it was natural. If I ignored them, their words became even sharper. See, she's ignoring us again. That's why I can't stand her. Even in those moments, I kept reminding myself of one thing: this house held Brian's memories. It was the home where Ken had grown up. I couldn't give up that easily. The tiles at the entrance were chosen by Brian. He compared colors over and over, and finally smiled, saying, "This one feels right." In the living room, faint traces of Ken's childhood scribbles still remained. "I love you, Dad," he had written in uneven, childlike lines. Seeing those remnants made my chest tighten, but relying on these memories to keep going was wearing me down. Every time I entered Heather's room, her words stung like daggers. "Mary, breakfast still isn't here. What are you doing?" I smiled as I placed the tray down. "Sorry to keep you waiting. Today, it's rice porridge and soup." "Ugh, rice porridge again? You're getting lazy, aren't you?" I wanted to argue, but my exhaustion swallowed the words. I only managed to mumble a faint apology. Stepping out of her room, I leaned against the wall and sighed deeply. "Is this really okay?" I asked myself silently, but I knew there would be no answer. I imagined Brian's voice as I had done so many times before. "You're doing great, Mary." I clung to that memory, even though it felt like it was fading away into the fog. Why is it that no matter how hard I try, nothing changes? As I walked back into the living room, a pile of unpaid bills caught my eye. I was paying for everything: the caregiver, medicine, and the rest of the household expenses. How much longer could I keep this up? At that moment, my phone buzzed. It was a message from Ken. "Mom, are you doing okay? I want to bring my fiancé over soon. Do you have a good day for that?" Reading those words brought a brief warmth to my heart. "Ken, I just want you to be happy." But even that moment of hope was shattered by Heather's voice. "Mary, turn on the TV for me, will you?" "Yes." Right away, I replied with a forced smile. Behind that smile, I felt myself slowly disappearing. Is this really okay? I kept asking myself, but no answer came. Ken came home one evening while I was preparing dinner. I heard the front door open, and instinctively, I stopped what I was doing and looked up. "I'm home, Mom." His right voice echoed through the kitchen and my heart leapt. Wiping my hands on my apron, I rushed to the entrance. Ken. Standing there was my son, taller and more grown up than I remembered. His broad shoulders and matured face made me pause, seeing just how much he'd grown. "Why didn't you call to say you were coming?" "I wanted to surprise you. Plus, I just wanted to see your face." His simple words warmed my heart, and I felt tears prick my eyes. "Don't cry, Mom. It hasn't been that long." He laughed, though I could see the faint embarrassment on his face. I know, but seeing you today makes me so happy." For the first time in a long while, my tightly wound heart felt a moment of release. "I've got something to tell you, Mom." "What is it?" "I'm getting married." The words froze me in place, my heart skipping a beat. "Really? You're getting married?" "Yeah. I want you to meet her. She's an amazing person." Hearing the joy in his voice, my chest swelled with emotion. "Oh, that's wonderful, Ken. We met at work. She's kind, gentle. Honestly, she reminds me of you, Mom." He said it so casually, but his sincerity shone through. My heart warmed as I realized how happy he was. "And Mom?" He paused for a moment, hesitating. "After we get married, I want you to live with us." For a moment my mind went blank. Live with Ken and his wife? It was something I had secretly wished for, but I never thought it would happen. "But what about your grandmother?" "I know it's complicated, but I don't want you to carry everything alone anymore." His words were filled with kindness and determination. I felt tears building up again, but I held them back. "Ken, I appreciate it, but it's not that simple." "I know, Mom, but we're family. Let's figure it out together." His gaze was steady, and all I could do was nod silently. That night, I lay in bed, unable to sleep. Ken's words echoed in my mind. "Come live with us." It felt like a dream, yet reality quickly sobered me. What about Mother? I knew Ken's fiancée couldn't be burdened with her care. My thoughts swirled in circles as I stared at the dark ceiling. What am I trying to protect? I have spent 10 years sacrificing my life for Heather, and now I hesitated to choose a new path. If I leave, what will happen to her? Images of Chris and Natalie flashed through my mind. Would they really take care of her? I already knew the answer. Of course not. I whispered the words aloud, bitterness rising in my chest. "I'll just leave her." The thought made me angry, but it also deepened my despair. I curled up under the blanket, tears streaming down silently. "Brian, what should I do?" I searched for his voice in my memory, but all I could see was his fading smile. A few days later, Ken spoke to Chris about Heather's care. When he returned home, his face was tense and filled with anger. "Mom, you won't believe what they said." "What happened?" "Chris said I should take Grandma with me. He and Natalie have no intention of taking care of her." His voice trembled with frustration. "They even said terrible things about you, Mom." Hearing that, my heart sank. "Ken, I don't want you to worry about this." "Don't say that, Mom. This isn't just your problem." I appreciated his words, but at that moment, Heather says something shocking. "I always thought you saw me as a burden, Mary." "A burden?" Her words hit me like a sharp slap. "You're just here for the inheritance, aren't you? But you won't get a single cent. All of it will go to Chris and Natalie." I froze. My chest tightened painfully as I stared at her cold, unyielding expression. "After everything I've done for you these past 10 years, is that what you really think of me?" My voice shook, but she remained unchanged, her demeanor calm, almost smug. At that moment, I made up my mind. "I understand. I'll leave this house." Heather's face turned pale, the smugness vanishing in an instant. "What? You're joking, right?" "Oh, I'm not joking. I've paid for everything. Your care, the household, all of it. From now on, Chris and Natalie can take care of you." Heather's face grew increasingly anxious. "Oh, they can't handle it. They don't care about me like you do." "Well, that's not my concern anymore. You chose them, didn't you?" My voice was steady, but I could feel the ears of bottled-up anger bubbling beneath it. Heather's shoulders shook as she tried to respond. "What am I supposed to do without you?" "I don't know, but Chris and Natalie are the ones you should rely on." My words struck her silent. For the first time, I saw her fear. I turned to Chris and Natalie, who were called to the living room. "What the hell? Why should we take care of her? We're busy. We thought you'd keep handling everything. If that's the case, you can decide to place her in a facility. I won't stop you." Chris's eyes widened, and I could see him finally grasping the weight of the situation. "Fine, we'll do it, but don't expect us to do it like you did." His voice was bitter, filled with resentment. I turned to Heather one last time. "I hope you'll be happy with your choice." Without waiting for a response, I turned away. I packed my things quickly, the years of burdens piling up in each bag. As I left through the front door, Heather's shouting voice followed me. "Mary, come back." But I didn't turn around. I whispered silently to myself, "Goodbye, Mother." I took my first step outside the house, the cool air brushing against my face. For the first time in years, I felt a strange sense of freedom. The night was calm, quieter than I had ever noticed before. All I could hear was the sound of my own footsteps, steady and resolute. After leaving Heather's house, I moved in with Ken and his fiancée, Lily. For the first time in years, I felt a sense of calm wash over me. Their home was warm, and filled with a quiet peace that I had almost forgotten. "Mom, you can relax now. You don't have to carry everything by yourself anymore." His words brought tears to my eyes, but this time, they were tears of relief. Lily welcomed me with open arms, her bright smile easing my hesitation. "Mary, I'm so happy to have you here with us." Her kindness and warmth made me feel like I belonged for the first time in years. Days passed, and I gradually settled into my new life. I helped with small chores around the house while continuing my work as an illustrator. Every day, Ken and Lily showed their appreciation. "Thank you, Mary. You've been such a big help." Hearing those words made my heart feel light. It was such a small thing, yet it meant everything to me. I hadn't realized how lonely I'd been until I finally felt seen and appreciated. One evening, while preparing dinner, Lily entered the kitchen with a smile. "You finished so early today, Mary. I thought I'd help out a little since I had time." "You're always so thoughtful. Thank you." She placed a gentle hand on my shoulder, and I nearly cried at the simple gesture. I spent so long carrying everything alone that this small act of care felt overwhelming. "We're really lucky to have you, you know." Her words stayed with me as we set the table together. Later that night, the three of us sat around the dinner table, sharing simple conversation. The laughter and warmth made me realize how far I had come. This life, this quiet, ordinary happiness, was something I had fought for. One day, Lily approached me with a shy smile, her hand resting on her stomach. "Mary, I wanted to tell you something." "What is it?" "We're going to have a baby." Her words stopped me in my tracks. I looked at her, my heart swelling with joy. "Lily, that's wonderful. I'm so happy for you both." Tears welled up in my eyes as I reached out to hold her hands. "Thank you for sharing this with me. Of course, you're family after all." Her words echoed in my mind. Family. After everything I had been through, I finally felt like I was part of one again. As time passed, Lily's belly grew, and I busied myself preparing for the baby's arrival. I found joy in the little tasks, folding tiny clothes, preparing meals, and supporting Lily. "Mom, you're really excited about this, of course. I can't wait to meet my grandchild." His laughter filled the room, and I felt my chest swell with happiness. Days that followed were filled with small but precious moments. On quiet afternoons, I would sip tea with Lily, talking about the future. "Have you thought of any baby names yet?" "Not yet, but I'll start thinking about it soon." Her gentle laugh brought warmth to my heart. For the first time in a long time, I allowed myself to look forward to the future. When the baby finally arrived, I held a tiny life in my arms and felt a tear roll down my cheek. "Welcome to the world, little one." At that moment, everything I had endured seemed to fade into the past. The pain, the loneliness, and the years of struggle had led me here, to this moment of peace. Months passed, and life in Ken and Lily's home gradually settled into a rhythm. Every morning, I would see them off to work, prepare meals, and care for the house. I found happiness in the smallest of moments, like hearing Ken's laughter, or Lily's tearful voice. Their gratitude for my presence made all the difference. One quiet afternoon, as I sat by the window with a cup of tea, Lily approached me. "Mary, I've been meaning to say, what is it? Thank you for everything you've done for us." Her words caught me off guard, and for a moment, I didn't know how to respond. "I should be the one thanking you. You've given me a family again." Lily smiled warmly, and I felt a deep sense of peace. That evening, as we sat around the dinner table, Ken turned to me with a thoughtful expression. "Mom, are you happy here?" This question made me pause. "Yes, Ken, I truly am." For the first time in years, I could say those words without hesitation. As I looked at Ken, Lily, and my grandchild, I realized that I had finally found my place. The shadows of the past no longer held me down. Brian's smile flashed in my memory, and I felt his presence, as if he were telling me, "Well done." I whispered silently into the quiet air. "Thank you, Brian. Life isn't always kind, but sometimes it leads us to the moments we truly deserve." I sat back watching my family laugh and talk, my heart full of gratitude and hope. This was my home, my family, my future,